Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Henchman's Memoirs. This is our campaign diary of our 5e Dungeons of Drakkenheim campaign, and this is a recap of Session 2. So, where we left off in Session 1, the characters were in Emberwood Village, and they were getting a quest from High Flamekeeper Ophelia Reed, who was giving them the exact same quest that they had gotten from the Blackjack Mel from the Queen's men. So they were getting the same quest to retrieve the same object from two different factions. Now, Talon hadn't exactly revealed exactly what they were supposed to get to the rest of his crew. He had told them about the job, but he hadn't filled them in on all the details of the threats of Blackjack Mel and all that kind of stuff. So when Ophelia Reed suddenly says, she has found out that there's this valuable scepter of St. Vitruvio buried in the crypts underneath this chapel. It's a bit of deja vu. And so innocently as all get out, they let her repeat the whole backstory of how everybody knows that it's there, and there are these different factions vying for it, and time is of the essence. And, she can offer them 1,000 gold, and she was going to offer them an uncommon magic item, which as the DM I hadn't even chosen. Some of the players have a lot more 5e experience than me, and I was just, why don't you guys pick out something that would be a good uncommon item that matches with the theme of a group of paladins that could be her offer in addition to the 1,000 gold pieces. And then she told them to bring the scepter actually to the camp that the Silver Order has set up, not back to Emberwood Village. Pietor started, or maybe it was Nexel, started kind of wheedling her a little bit, and it's like, well, can you give us any payment up front? This is going to be a dangerous mission. She's like, no, I don't have the money on me. It's back at our camp. But I can give you guys a couple of Cure Light Wounds scrolls, which the group doesn't have. Thaddeus is kind of their dedicated healer. And Thaddeus can use those scrolls. So they managed to get 2 scrolls out of the deal. And then they left the chapel. I thought they were, headed into the city, and we were going to get all this underway. But Peter was like, hey, let's still stop by the watchtower and see what the quest there was. So there was a different guy at the front door drinking his morning coffee. And after he looked them over, he said, Ansem Lang is actually looking for a group of adventurers to undertake a special mission for him. And but he explained that it's kind of on the QT. It's kind of a unofficial, unsanctioned mission. So they decide to go in and see what his situation is. They meet Ansem, and he explains that his sister Petra, they're both urban rangers who work for the Hooded Lanterns and are kind of exploring and retaking the city. They're part of that project. He and his sister and a group of urban rangers were ambushed by ratlings, and he was badly injured. His sister was dragged off, and his commander has told them, we don't sacrifice lives of our hooded rangers or of our hooded lanterns on potentially suicidal rescue missions. But Ansem is convinced that she's still alive. He has heard that sometimes the ratlings will keep prisoners alive as a fresh snack for later, and he's just 100% convinced that she's still alive. So he offers the party a reward if they can go to the Rat's Nest, which, touch of irony, it was called the Rat's Nest before the meteorite struck, but after it did, the meteor struck, it destroyed this tavern called the Rat's Nest, but now it's a nest full of ratlings, and so he knows that's where his sister's been taken. He's too badly contaminated from his visit to the city. They hit him with a sling bolt that was made of delirium. He's got several levels of exhaustion, and he can't officially send any hooded lanterns in to do the job, but if the party will rescue his sister, he'll put in a good word with the commander of the Hooded Lanterns, and he will pay them out of his own pocket. So the party was kind of a little bit flippant with him, and I'm, like, oh, well, she's probably dead. Maybe we can just bring back a finger or something. And I'm like, are you saying this in front of him? There was kind of a little disconnect between the role play and sort of the seriousness of the situation. But eventually they're like, yeah, we'll look for her if we get out there. And he's like, look, if you guys are going to I need to know if you guys are going to do this job. Otherwise I'm going to find somebody else. And they're like, yeah, we'll do it. And so they left Emberwood Village. And I got to do a little piece that was, I thought, particularly fun for me. So, first of all, I showed them this artwork from the campaign book that shows the city before its destruction 15 years ago. As I said, two of the characters were from the city. So I just kind of pointed out some of the major landmarks. Castle Draken, which is where the royal family lived. There's the cosmological clock tower, which was this sort of steampunky kind of wonder of science and technology. The Inscrutable Tower, which was where the headquarters of the Royal Academy, the Amethyst Academy of all the wizards and sorcerers and so forth. And over here you could see the dome of the Chapel of St. Vitruvio, which was sort of the Vatican of the capital before its destruction. And then I was able to make the transition to this art piece, which is on the DM screen that comes with the backer kit. And I also sent to their phones and so forth, where you see they come over they cross the stream, leaving Emberwood. They go along the trail and they come up this hill and they see the city there in the distance, laying waste. Way up here at the top, you can see Castle Draken, which looks all spooky and haunted now, and it's kind of the Ganondorf castle of the campaign. You can still see the dome of the Chapel of St. Vitruvio. You can even see the cosmological clock tower. But here you can see that the Inscrutable Tower was actually struck by a piece of the meteorite and broken apart. But the top part of the tower is floating, unsupported. Oh, sorry. You can't see that because of the thing. You can see the tower here. The top part is floating, unsupported. And some of the damaged pieces are kind of still floating in midair. And then down here, you can see the crater where the biggest part of the meteorite hit and destroyed part of the city walls. Now, both of these pictures kind of show the inner city. There's a lot more of outskirts of the city, kind of shown here, where the early parts of the adventure are going to take place. But I thought it was really cool to be able to acquaint them with some of the landmarks of the late campaign when they first look out on the city. So then as they head into the city, we transfer over to this map, which comes in the backer kit in this beautiful cloth giant thing that takes up most of your game table. Emberwood Village is off the map way down here. This is the direction that the party is approaching the city. And Area 20 here is the Chapel of St. Brenna, where they're supposed to go look for this magic sort of staff or rod. But way up here in the eastern part of the city is the Rat's Nest. So the players talk about it for a little bit. They talk about the two quests out of character. And basically they decide that saving Handsome Ansem's sister is more time sensitive than retrieving this scepter. And so even though at the end of the last session I had assumed that they were going to head down here, and I had totally prepped the Chapel of St. Brenna, got all my minis together and everything else, they decided, let's head up to the Rat's Nest and do that instead. But, that's part of the par for the course, an experienced DM like me. So the party circles around the city, and they're going to start heading in. They're going to start looking for the Rat's Nest. And as they started to get into the streets of the city, I really wanted to play up the mists. First of all, they talk about this haze that surrounds the city, but I want to lean more into sort of the mists of Ravenloft kind of feel. I wanted to play into how quiet the city is. I wanted to focus on that kind of a post-disaster, post-apocalyptic kind of feel where you're walking through this city. It's just completely silent, and all you can hear is the wind blowing between the buildings, and there's no voices and no sounds of life. Very Dark Souls. And And so the party got into the city. The other thing that I wanted to play into, a big influence on this campaign is H.P. Lovecraft's story, The Color Out of Space. In The Color Out of Space, this asteroid lands in this farmer's field, and it's giving off this weird radiation that's leaching all of the color out of the surrounding plant life, and it's affecting, sort of mutating the surrounding animal life and so forth. And they drill into this thing and they uncover this color, the color out of space, right? Which is like a color that no earthly eye had ever seen. It can't even be described. It's just so alien and nauseating, this color out of space. What could it be? Which I always thought was kind of interesting, because ever since, people have tried to make, comic books and TV shows and movies based on this short story. And I've always thought, how do you even shoot a scene where somebody is encountering a color that it cannot be just a mix of ordinary earthly colors? They did a Nicolas Cage movie based on that story a couple years ago, and I think they did the same thing that the Dungeons did. They kind of went with this purple color to just kind of give the sort of nauseating sense of what this color might be. In Dungeons of Drakkenheim, they call it octarine, the octarine glow of the city. But it's a color that is no color. It's not purple. Believe me, it's not purple. So I described as the characters entered the city, they start to notice how the color is leached out of everything, and it looks like what was his name? Snyder's Man of Steel. Where they kept pushing down the color contrast until everything just looked kind of gray and washed out and so forth. And very much that's how Drakkenheim looks. You can see awnings and banners and signs that were probably colorful when the city was inhabited, but now are all strangely muted and grayed out. So the first check that they came across, they were traveling down this street, and they come across this bank of fog that I described as being like very abrupt, not like magically so, but like if you've ever been driving to work or been out in the woods somewhere and seen this wall of fog that's like just incredibly abrupt. And that's what they noticed. And so they were thinking about trying to find a way around. Talon, who has a climb speed, climbed up on this building to get a better look, and he could see a block further away. They could, in fact, get through this mist. It was only about a block distant, but he was looking for a way around when Pietro decided to go up and kind of blow at the mist and see if his breath would disturb it and stuff. And I described that it did disturb it, but then he saw this vague outline in the mist that looked like his own face looking back at him, when suddenly the face came out of the mist, and he realized it wasn't him looking back at him, it was a delirium dreg. So delirium dregs are people who have been mutated by the otherworldly radiation of the color out of space, and now they're kind of the zombies of this semi-post-apocalyptic setting. And the cool thing they did in the book is they give you the base stats for a delirium dreg, which is basically just like a zombie, but then they give you like 10 or 15 different variations of different ways they can be mutated, and each one has its own unique sort of special ability or special resistances or whatever. So the four I chose were four dregs that come with the set and had been painted for us by one of our players, who I have to say is probably the world's okayest mini painter. And the four delirium dregs are similar to the four that are shown here. You've got this one that's got this ridiculously long tentacle mouth. You've got this one, which I think is called like a cyclopean one, but it's got this exposed brain and all this kind of stuff. And then there was one that was bloated and obviously inspired by Left 4 Dead, this big bloated kind of zombie guy. And then there was one that was a leech that could split its face open and leech on to grab hold of the characters. So the players roll for initiative, and immediately these things are coming out and getting on Pietro. He was high enough in the initiative, he got to do his Drunken Master Jackie Chan thing. He picked up a random bucket off the ground and started fighting with it and smashed this thing in the face and managed to back up a little bit. The bloater came out And Thaddeus decided to cast Entangle, which surprisingly in 5th edition there doesn't even need to be grass there already. You can just cast Entangle on a section of city street and things just pop up. So anyway, he managed to entangle a couple of these guys, but this one, the Cyclops one, has this psychic scream ability. So she gets out here and she unleashes that, and everybody decides they're in for a serious fight. Thaddeus was actually got the frightened condition from her psychic scream. This one with the tentacles came out. I think the one with the tentacles ended up entangled at one point, and I laughed triumphantly as I noticed that the one with the tentacles, his special ability is being able to attack foes that are 15 feet away. So they were wailing on Peter, and at one point the leech one managed to get his face. It was kind of the monster from the second, or maybe it was the first season of Stranger Things, but the ones whose face could split open, and it was just like face hugging him and sucking his vitality away. While this one decided to spit bile up at Talon, so he had to nimbly jump out of the way. So Thaddeus is frightened. He decides to turn into a giant spider and climb up on the wall here. Nexel is casting some spells and doing his thing. He used some power that let him, as a reaction, do damage. It's completely unfair the way these 5e rules are written. Thaddeus managed to web this one with some of his booty hole webs, but this guy could still spit bile because he got the recharge. As the fight went on, Talon has some rogue ability that allows him to throw these psychic daggers that do psychic damage, which he was using to good effect. But I noticed in the description for the Cyclops one, she's immune to psychic damage because she's kind of a psionic delirium dreg. So he threw a dagger at her, and he would have missed anyway, but I described it kind of just decohering when it got within about 5 feet of her, and he was like, noted. So after that, the party pretty quick. Nexel got into the spell game. Peter jumped up and was kung fu fighting, and the party managed to deal with them without too many more troubles. The only cool part I was hoping for was this guy the bloater has a death burst ability that I was hoping would spew venom all over everybody and get a few hit points off of these 3rd level guys, but it was only within a 5-foot radius. So when Talon destroyed it with one of his psychic daggers, it just kind of blopped all over nobody. And the party finished this up, and they decided, you know what, forget this mist. We're just going to find our way around and get to the rat's nest by a different route. So after they cleared that encounter, they are going around trying to get to the rat's nest. And an idea that I've imported into my Drakkenheim from the 4th edition write-up on Gloomrot, which is this city in the Shadowfell, is there are these different districts to the city, and each one of them is sort of haunted and creepy in its own unique way. So as they come around, they start to get into the Dust Warden of my Drakkenheim setting, and there's this thin layer of dust and just like pollen almost over everything, the streets, the buildings, everything. And like even as the players are walking through, they're kind of stirring this fine dust up, but one of them looks back and notices, just like a block behind them, even their own footprints are like disappearing as if it was snowing, but there's no dust falling, there's just dust all over everything. So they're making their way through the Dust Warden, and they're getting closer and closer to the rat's nest. And then up ahead, they hear this sound. And I think it was Talon who kind of peeked in, and there's this sort of a little town square, little plaza area, with kind of a fountain in the middle, and they've got their current path takes them across it to try to get out to the rat's nest. And I had gotten hold off of Etsy of these Cathedral Knight minis that are themed after Dark Souls. So scale-wise, these guys are about 9 feet tall, and I'm going to use them as the kind of the hollowed or the the undead sort of guardians of the city. These are people who used to be knights of the elite royal guard, and now in unlife they kind of stalk the city. And so these two are kind of pacing around this square in a very robotic kind of way, and the players just peek around and see these two towering guys. This guy's staff, the end of his staff is about as big as an engine block, and these two are just pacing endlessly around this plaza, and the players have to decide how they're going to get by. So that's where we ended session 2, and I'll be back in a little bit to tell you guys how things go in the next session. Thanks for listening.